Hello, it's me, Kyle, Give Pause Hobby. We are back with another ROOTbot Academy episode, this time featuring the Electric Eyrie, everyone's favorite angry burbs. Almost gonna get right into it. Remember, this is part of an ongoing series. Episode 0 was the Law of Root, so if you have not listened to that, there's a link somewhere around here. Make sure you go listen to that because there will be assumptions I'm making now in this video that you know how the law of rootbotics works in order to make sure you know how this works. There's also episode 1, which was the Mechanical Marquee 2.0. And I'm told that the S is not necessarily supposed to be pronounced. My defense, in addition to just being an ignorant American, is that Marquis, the solo game about squaring off against the Nazi uprising in France, is just a QUI S at the end, no E. And so I don't know, for some reason the E at the end of Marquee makes me think that it's supposed to be pronounced differently. I don't know. English is a super confusing language where our spelling sometimes changes things and sometimes it doesn't. So I'm sorry. But anyways, Mechanical Marquee 2.0, also linked somewhere around here. I would say if this is your first time diving into the rootbots, is a better place to start. It's a lot more straightforward. Again, my goal on all of these is to teach you that if you follow the instructions, the rootbots are not nearly as intimidating as they might originally seem and feel. But that said, there's still a range of challenge to pilot them. And I would say the RoboCats are in the thumbs up category, like not too much to worry about. So go check those out first if you haven't already. And lastly, if I would make sure your Klingon subtitles are on, because there may come a time when I realize hopefully all the rules are up here and I understand them correctly. However, sometimes I misspeak, so if that happens, I'll hop in and make a little adjustment. If there's anything really bad, I'll make a different episode to address it, but hopefully I never have to do that. So anyways, all of that said, let's dive in and see what makes the Electric Eyrie tick. First off, the name Electric Eyrie, I think, is pretty solid as far as names go. There's not quite as much history as Mechanical Marquee 2.0, but the EE is as solid names come. And so let's move on. 4.1. The overview. So the Electric Eyrie will inspire fear in the most stalwart of players. Like the Eyrie dynasties, this bot can ramp up its action potential aggressively. I haven't really. Maybe another series would be how to play against the bots. This is how to play them. Just to give ideas of strategies to go up against them. I haven't really spent any time on that, but I will say that overview completely tracks, because if you allow the EE to sort of spread out, and just like the actual regular Eyrie dynasties, if you let them do their thing, they're going to get into an uncomfortably good place. So that's on you. All right, so 4.2, and I'm going in order of the Law of Rootbotics paragraphs, just as a reminder. So if you are following along at home and you want to just double check what I'm saying, or I'm kind of guiding you where to look in the Law of Rootbotics. So next up, the rules for the faction. So there's the normal ones. There is hates surprises and poor manual dexterity, which we've talked about before. And then there's also the third, which, just like the Marquee before this, is the same as the meatbag version. So Lords of the Forest still says you rule clearings where you are tied in presence. Works exactly the same. So we move on from that to the actual setup. As always, or as before, there is not setup on the back like with the player boards. It's in the Law of Rootbotics, And it goes as follows. So you're going to gather all your warriors. Then you're going to place a roost and your starting warriors. So place 6 warriors and a roost opposite the corner of the marquee. If there are cats in the game, they go opposite them as usual. If there are not cats, just to find the corner randomly, and pretty simple from there. Then you're going to tuck your viziers. So you'll notice at the top of the Electric Eyrie board are not the actions, but are the suits of the cards. And we'll get to how that works in a little bit, because those of you who've only played the regular birds, you're like, wait, but how do we know what to do? We'll get to it. So you're going to put your viziers over here. Naturally it's 2, but we'll get to why it might be different later on. Wink, wink. And then last but not least, you're going to fill your roost tracks, leaving the leftmost space. So this one that gets you 0 points for having 1 roost, that's already on the board. So the other 6 are going to go covering up those other slots. And you're good to go. So next up, Birdsong. Pretty simple. The first 2 are the same as they were for the cats. You will first reveal an order card. Second, you will craft an order card if it has an item on it, not an ability, but an item. And there's an item in the bank for it, getting 1 victory point if able. So an interesting thing here, I know I just passed the berries, but the regular meat bag birds have disdain for trade, where they only get 1 victory point unless you're using the Woody Woodpecker leader. This doesn't have, the Electric Eyrie doesn't have disdain for trade technically, but because it's a bot, it sort of shadow does, because all bots only get 1 point per item, which is what disdain for trade did. So reveal, craft. Third, you're going to add the order card to the matching decree column. That's it. That's your Birdsong. So now let's get into what those cards in your columns are going to do. Before I get into Daylight, I'm going to make a quick heads up to those like myself who are in at the ground level. This is first printing Clockwork material. There was, well, first of all, there was just a bug in how the Electric Eyrie worked, but there was also a sizable change of how Daylight takes place that was put out. I don't think it's available anymore, but Leader Games did make a sticker available that would go over the sections of the player board to fix it, but they do still have the PDF of that sticker available for free on their website that you can print off and tape onto or glue onto your board. And also Clockwork 2, I believe I read this, is going to come with a new player board. So people like me who I have the sticker that I've also taped. Oh, no. That's right. I taped on the PDF ahead of time and I put the sticker on top of it. So the tape is just, it's just extra, it makes it look cool. Because I have the sticker under the tape. So I'm going to be able to just toss this board and get the new one when it comes out with Clockwork 2. Again, I believe that I heard that. Anyways, I'm not going to bother anyone because second printing and onwards do not have these mistakes. So what I'm about to read in Daylight is what it should be. So to check to see which version you have, if you're under Daylight, if the first step says resolve the decree, if yours says you must resolve the decree starting with the leftmost column and moving right, you have the old version of the Electric Eyrie. If yours says resolve the decree, recruit for each column in the decree with at least blah, 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 you have the good version. So if you have that first one, go to the link, it's down in the description to Leader Games website, download that PDF and put it on your board because this is the new official way. We've talked a little bit before, there are director's cuts of the Clockwork factions that Benjamin Schmaus has put out, where he's done additional tweaking beyond the official version to change the way some things work, to balance things and all that. This is not that. The director's cut are optional, are a totally, a parallel track to the Clockwork expansion. The change to Daylight for Electric Eyrie has now become leader canon of how this faction plays. So you're going to want to make sure you have it. So yeah, I will go over the differences after I get through Daylight, once I get through how to actually play the whole turn of the Electric Eyrie, because it's immaterial. It's really for the historians out there who want to know what it was before. So anyways, without any further ado, let's get to Daylight. So there are only 2 steps. And importantly, you'll notice that there's an arrow that takes you through all of the actions except build, which is the 2nd step. That is important because they are separate from each other. Again, those of you who've played regular birds know that build is something that is part of your decree, but in this case, it is not. Your decree is just recruit, move, and battle. So you will recruit in each column with at least 1 card from left to right, and then move that way, and then battle in that way. So you will, let's say you have 1 fox, you got no mouse, no rabbit, and you have your 2 viziers over here in your birds. So that means you would recruit 1 in a fox clearing if you have a roost, and over here you would recruit 2 guaranteed because birds are wild, and then you would go down to the tiebreakers for recruiting. Same thing for moving. You would move from fox, you would move from tiebreaker from anywhere. Then battling, you would battle in a fox clearing and then battle tiebreakers. So again, I told you I wasn't going to say it, but this is kind of a big one. It used to be you would in fox suit, you would recruit, move, battle. Then you go over to mouse, recruit, move, battle. Recruit, move, battle. It is not that way anymore, and I think it's better because now you just do 1 action across the board. You ka-chunk, click down to the next action, and do it for all the suits. I think it's easier to remember. So, first up, recruit. You recruit warriors equal to the cards in the column. Pretty simple. In a matching clearing with a roost. Also, pretty simple. Ties. Let's assume you have 2 fox clearings and only 1 card, and you're going to recruit 1 warrior, but you have 2 clearings where they could go. Recruit in such a clearing with the most enemy pieces, then fewest Eyrie warriors, then lowest priority. So again, Electric Eyrie is kind of one of the primary examples of the tricksy bots that actually prioritizes low priority, which I see as them kind of underhandedly trying to take back their kingdom, which I think is cool. So that's how recruit works. There's always going to break the tie because if you get to the 3rd step, one of the clearings is going to be lower priority than the other, and then boom, that's where your birds go. And you're going to do that for all 4 suits. Remember, the bird one means it could go into the same clearing that this one went into, because this is inclusive of all the other suits. Also, just because you have a card in a suit doesn't mean it's guaranteed to actually do something, because you might not have a roost to make a new warrior, a clearing of that type with warriors to move, or a clearing with warriors that also has enemies to battle. So the only one you're almost guaranteed to always do is when you get down to the bird column. Next up, move. You're going to move from the matching clearing. So from the suit that you are working with, just like the birds. You operate, they move from that suit to wherever they want to go. From the matching clearing you rule with the most Eyrie warriors. Move to an adjacent clearing with no roost. If all of them have a roost, move to the one with the fewest enemy pieces. Then make sure you're leaving warriors to exactly rule the origin clearing or equal to cards in this column, whichever is higher. So when you're moving, again, you are prioritizing above all else, moving to a clearing that does not have a roost. You are the Eyrie. You want to expand your roost network. So that is the top priority. If there is a tie below that, you're going to go to the one with fewest enemy pieces, and that enemy pieces is inclusive of tokens and buildings, remember, not just warriors, and then lowest priority. which no, I don't know why they kind of double tapped one of those, well, actually two of those tiebreakers, and like in the narrative and the list here, but I guess they're just making sure that it happened. I mean, because technically, to a clearing with no roost is already first tiebreaker, because if all of them have no roost or none of them have a roost, then you go to the next one and so on and so forth, but whatever. So that second part, leaving warriors behind. You want to, again, remembering Lords of the Forest, you rule if you are tied for rule in a clearing. So you leave behind, including, there are 2 enemy warriors in your clearing you're leaving from, and you obviously have a roost there, and let's say 3 warriors. So you're going to leave one of those warriors behind because your building is the other piece. That means you are tied for rule, which means you rule. So those 2 other warriors, this is a weird demonstration I'm doing here, those 2 other warriors are free to roam, and they're the ones who are actually going to go to, again, clearing with no roost, then with fewest enemy pieces, then lowest priority. All right, next up, battle. You're going to battle in a matching clearing. The defender is the player with the most buildings, including 0. If this column has the most cards, deal an extra hit. Deal 1 extra hit. First up, it says clearing ties is above defender ties, which is important because you are first going to choose which clearing you go to, and only then are you going to have to settle defender ties. So if you have, let's say you're in Fox, you have 2 Fox clearings with some of warriors of your own and at least some warriors of somebody else. Let's say in this clearing it's you and 2 other factions, in this clearing it's you and 1. So this would require a defender tie, but if this one is the winner of the clearing tie, then you don't need to worry about the defender tie because you go to the clearing where it's just you and 1 other opponent. So the ordering of this is, it's the way it reads is the way it works. So the clearing ties, battle in such a clearing with no roost. Again, you need to spread out your roost network. Then the most defenseless buildings, then lowest priority. Pretty simple there. Once you have figured out which clearing, if there are multiple opponents there, the defender ties will be battle such a player with the most pieces, then the most victory points. And as always, if you are still tied past the end of the provided tiebreakers, you always have, for clearings, typically the assumed final tiebreaker is high priority. Now, Electric Eyrie short-circuited that because they have made it an effort to say lowest priority is their last tiebreaker. But regarding factions and different players, there is always setup order that breaks ties, and that is the last stop. Someone will be higher in setup order. So from cats to birds to alliance, vagabonds, so on and so forth. It's the order that they set up in the law of root. So when you're actually battling, remember, if it has the column you are resolving has the most cards, then deal 1 extra hit. And in the law of rootbotics, it goes into a little bit more depth here, and it says if the column has more cards than each other column. So that does not mean if you're going to start with 2 over here with your viziers, and eventually let's say you get to 2 foxes and 2 mice. That does not mean you get an extra hit for fox, mouse, and birds. That means nothing gets extra hits. You have to have 1 column that is more than all the rest. Only when that happens do you get the 1 additional hit, because it's brutal. You don't want to be giving it out willy-nilly more than you actually need to be. All right, so once you've resolved the decree, the second and final step of daylight is build. Place a roost in the clearing you rule of highest priority with no roost. If you cannot place a roost, you fall into discord or turmoil. So it doesn't say it, but remember, you start with this roost on the board and you go over this way. You don't just pick up this one and get 6 points because that would be madness. So let's hop over to Turmoil. If you cannot place a roost, you have 3 steps to follow. First, humiliate. You're going to lose 1 victory point per bird card, including viziers on the decree. So, the more bird cards the Electric Eyrie gets, the more flexible they are. However, just like with player birds, that's a liability that they may have to pay later on. Second, purge. You will discard the entire decree except your viziers. So if you have 3 additional bird cards here, so 5 cards in this column, you're going to first lose those 5 victory points. Then those 3 additional bird cards are going to go, but the viziers stick around. And last but not least, rest. Go to evening. So this just kind of pushes you onwards to the next thing. There's nothing else to rest. As the board lays it out, there is not a time that you can go into Turmoil any earlier than build, which is not the case for human birds. So the fact that you can't place the roost is in and of itself, a punishment. But then you just kind of go on to evening after that. Just like the human birds, in evening, you still score victory points, even if you went into Turmoil. It's the only step in evening. It's the shortest of all the ROOTbots because you don't have to discard your cards. Your order card becomes part of your decree. So the only step is score victory points listed on the rightmost empty space on the roost track. So if you have 2 roosts on the board, so these are all covered up, you're going to score 1 victory point. If you have all of them on the board, you're going to score a 6. And that's it. That's the board. Now, I'm going to take you over to the table to show you the example turn. Now, importantly, if you have the first printing of the Law of Rootbotics, this example turn will no longer be useful because the whole board is different. So you have to go to the newer Law of Rootbotics, which is where I have taken my script from here. But down below, I'll put a link to the newest Law of Rootbotics on Leader Games' page as well. And let's go to the table to, again, show you the example turn, but in motion as opposed to just a static image with the text. So let's go. All right, welcome to the table. This is the Eyrie example turn. And again, if you have an early printing, specifically a first printing of the Law of Rootbotics, then the example turn that is in here for the Eyrie is no longer relevant because the daylight actions that we went over in the teaching part are no longer relevant. Just for a little bit of bona fides, I printed out the new copy of Law of Rootbotics, which I will get an actual one when I get Clockwork 2, but for right now I just have this printing. And these highlighted sections are the new things. So there's a lot that translates over, but again, as we talked about before, a couple of the things make some pretty big changes to how the Electric Eyrie operates. So we're going to demonstrate it now. Hey, it's me from the future. The table is the same, but you eagle-eyed viewers will notice that the board state is different. That's because I realized I didn't say anything about the first typo I found on this page when I started, and I'm not going to go through and adjust the map so it looks exactly the same. Spoiler, this is how this example turn turns out. Hopefully that didn't wreck anything for you. So there were 2 typos I found on the page, and the first one is very simple. It's that in clearing 11, it had a fox space there, but it actually should be mouse. It's a mouse clearing. You can never put down a base that doesn't match the clearing for the Alliance, robot or human. So it was just the wrong icon, not a biggie. I'll cover the other typo I found, which is of slightly bigger importance when we get there in the actual example. That's it. All right, back to the past, where you could pretend you didn't see this board state. There we go. It's midway through the game, and it's the Electric Eyrie's turn. First, they draw and reveal a card. It is Rabbit Root T. This is the order card. Though this card has an item, you'll notice way up at the top, we're missing some of the items from the supply. We don't have any boots, we don't have any tea, we don't have the crossbow or one of the bags. So, can't be crafted. So instead, they just add the card to the decree right into the rabbit column. So now, their grand total is 1 fox, 1 rabbit, and the 2 vizier cards from earlier in the game. Well, they always have. Then the Eyrie resolves their decree, starting by recruiting from left to right. The fox column has 1 card, so they place 1 warrior in their only fox clearing with a roost, number 8. The mouse column has no cards, so the Eyrie skip and go to the rabbit column, placing 1 warrior in their only rabbit clearing with a roost. So 1 more in number 3. Then they recruit for the bird column, placing 2 warriors in the same fox clearing, number 8, that they did for the fox column, since that clearing has more enemy pieces than the rabbit clearing, number 3, and the mouse clearing, number 7. The other 2 clearings where they have roosts. So this is an important point that when you talk about enemy pieces, you are in terms of breaking ties for clearings, you combine them. So there is 1 cat and 1 alliance piece here. They combine into being 2 pieces, even though there's only 1 of each. That still means that's where the most is, so that's where they're gonna poop out the most birds. Then they start moving. First, they move out of the bottom fox clearing, number 8, to an adjacent clearing with no roost. The only one with no roost is the corner rabbit clearing, number 4. So they move 3 warriors there. The fox column has 1 card, so they have to leave 1 warrior behind. And again, they don't need to bulk up anymore because there aren't multiple enemy pieces here, because they either have to leave as many warriors as there are cards in the column, or at least the amount to break even and rule the clearing. In this case, they rule it handily. The alliance is a human, so moving into the clearing with a sympathy causes outrage. So the alliance draws a card and adds it to their supporters stack. If the alliance were a bot, the move would not cause outrage. We'll talk more about that when we get to automated alliance next. So like with recruit, we're going to skip over moving from mouse because there are no mouse cards in the decree. For the rabbit move, they move from the bottom right rabbit clearing, number 3, because it has the most Eyrie warriors. Because they do have 1 over here, but it only has 3 warriors to the 4 warriors over here. And they're going to move to the rightmost fox clearing because it has no roost and fewer enemy pieces than the central mouse clearing where there's a bunch. So they're going to move 3 warriors because they have to leave 1 behind for the 1 rabbit card in the decree. Finally, for the bird move, they move from the bottom left rabbit clearing, number 4, since it is tied for having the most Eyrie warriors and has the higher priority than the fox clearing. So 3 and 3, but this is priority 4, so it breaks the tie. They then move into the central fox clearing, number 12, since it has fewer enemy pieces than the leftmost mouse clearing, number 9. They're going to move 1 warrior since they have to leave behind 2 since there are 2 cards in the bird column. Finally, they start battling. So this is where we're going to see the second typo in this example. The first, again, being that this was a mouse base for the alliance, not a fox base. That one's pretty simple. This is just a different icon. However, this one, well, I'll get to it in a second. So they finally start battling, first in the only fox clearing where they can battle, number 8. Now, obviously, this is true. They don't have a battle here in number 6 because there are no enemies over here. It is true they have enemies here. However, they just moved in to number 12. So in this case, they would they actually have 2 battles here that they could be taking on. And if we go to the battling clearing ties, you're first going to battle in a clearing with no roost. So they would not battle in number 8, as the example turn lays out. They would battle in number 12. So they're going to roll the dice. Ooh, and they got double zeros. So nothing there, no bonuses because we're in the Fox column, and it means they don't have the most cards in it. So they are not going to remove anything or have any warriors removed. Now, just to use the example for what it is, if they would have battled here, they would have taken the battle to the Alliance, because even though the Cats and the Alliance have the same number of pieces, the Alliance is slightly ahead on the victory point track. And because this is a human player, since this is undefended, they would have guaranteed remove it. They would have gotten a victory point for it. However, the Alliance player would have been able to draw another card for outrage. But none of that happened because they fought in number 12. So, again, we're skipping over mouse because there are no cards there. Then they battle in the corner rabbit clearing number 4, because it is the only rabbit clearing where they can battle. Now this one, they are 100% right. So there is a piece there, there is no piece here. So the Alliance is the only possible defender. They remove the sympathy token. Womp womp. So the Eyrie score 1 victory point and cause outrage once more. Boop. So that thing, it happened. For the bird column, they're going to battle in the Fox clearing that they moved into, where we battled before. Because if you look at all the available battles that they have one in 8, 7, 11, and 12. Only in 2 of those are there spaces for roost to be placed. That leaves 12 and 11. And if you go to the next tiebreaker, most defenseless buildings, there are 0 in both of them. However, 12 is lower priority than 11. And this battle would probably not be great for the birds. So 12 it is. So I'm gonna roll. Whoa, get over here, dice. And womp womp. You get double 0 again. However, since this is the bird column, they have 2 cards to the 1 card in the others. They get the bonus hit, meaning they do in fact remove the cat. And that is the end of the decree. At the end of daylight, the Eyrie will build a roost in the bottom left corner rabbit clearing. Because when they place their roost, they always go into the place they ruled highest priority. So 3 is highest, but that already has a roost. Next up is 4, where they just placed it. And finally, in evening, they're going to score 3 victory points, because when they place that roost, the 4th one on the board, that opens up 3 victory points a turn for them to earn. So hopefully that was helpful to see. This picture is even more confusing than the mechanical marquee. If you understand what's going on, it's perfectly readable. But if you are, say, learning it for the first time, it might be a little bit overwhelming. So hopefully seeing it in action helped out. And yeah, let's go back over and hear about the cards.
All right, so we're back from the example turn. And last thing before I sign off, we have difficulty and trait cards. So difficulty are pretty easy. Again, the board itself is just normal, is the standard difficulty. If you want things to be a little bit easier, during setup, you only add 1 loyal vizier to the decree. So they just get 1 fewer action. It also doesn't guarantee that bonus hit at the beginning of the game, because as soon as you put 1 other card down, unless it's a bird card, you're going to tie those number of cards in the column, and then you don't get the bonus hits. So definitely does its job. Challenging, going up a bit, during setup, take 1 bird ambush card from the deck and add it to the bird column of the decree. Now, if you're playing against all bots, losing this ambush card really doesn't, obviously it makes the birds harder, but you're not losing the utility of that ambush card as well. If you have another human player in the game, 1 or more other humans in addition to the Electric Eyrie, this is much more impactful because the bird ambush card is kind of important. So not only does it well, A, give the birds more actions just in general. B, gives them the most of the more of the most versatile actions on their board. C, allows them to get that extra hit guaranteed for the first at least 2 turns of the game. But also, if you have other humans in the game, you lose access to the bird ambush card, so kind of changes the game. Last but not least, Nightmare. Just like always, it's the same as the challenging rules, except it adds, at the end of evening, score 1 additional victory point, which, again, according to Benjamin on the BetterBot Project forums, when they went through testing, most of the bots lost what would translate to be about 1 victory point a turn from their functionality. So if you want another way of changing difficulty, you can disregard these altogether and just do that last part of Nightmare, where they still get the standard 2 Viziers, but at the end of evening, they get 1 victory point. So it's just an additional, you're just making the fuse that much shorter that they need to burn through before the end of the game. All right, and last but not least, traits. So again, I have ordered them in my personal preference of these 4 different varieties. I like to think of difficulty cards as the skill level of the player, of the bot, and the trait cards as kind of like the character, like what sort of player they are, as opposed to just how good are they. So my first choice is Nobility. You now fall into turmoil if you cannot place a roost or a warrior. Previously it was just a roost. Whenever you fall into turmoil, you do not lose victory points. Instead, you score 1 victory point per bird card in the decree. So you still purge your decree and you still rest. So this is probably why the turmoil is written as it is on the board, because the normal turmoil, where if you can't place a roost, you go to the next step. That third step does nothing. It says go to evening. That's where you're headed anyways. However, this changes that humongously. So just like with the human player, starting or rather sending the birds into turmoil on recruit is crippling. And the same is true here, which is why it's fun. It adds an added challenge to you, because they're going to get that benefit of actually getting victory points for the bird cards in their decree. However, you can stop a whole turn from taking place, or most of a turn, so yeah, Nobility, I think, is definitely the most interesting of the 4 traits. Let's keep on going. Silver medal for Relentless. After resolving the decree, remove all defenseless buildings and tokens in any clearing with Eyrie warriors. Now this one, before the Mechanical Marquee 2.0 ones, the first 2 were really close together. This is a bigger gap, because I do like this. I think it's interesting. The problem is, and it kept coming up, well, whenever this came up, when I was playing against the, rotating through the core factions with the 3 bots of whatever else I wasn't playing, when the Alliance and the Electric Eyrie would clash and Relentless was in play, it just meant it was really challenging for the Alliance to get anything done. And I mean, that is the game for humans, but against other bots, it's sort of like how the Cats one of buildings take 2 hits to destroy. It sort of just means a lot of stuff fizzles out, as opposed to in the Cats where it would just prevent destruction of buildings. This prunes growth, because otherwise it'd be oh, we just made it through that battle. Now it's well, and we get rid of that thing. So it's definitely interesting. It adds another wrinkle to the challenge, but in a way that isn't always the most fun, or the most interesting. Next up, bronze medal. This is just further down still. Swoop. At the end of daylight, place 2 warriors in the clearing of highest priority with no Eyrie pieces. I mean, personally, I've progressed in my opinion of the Electric Eyrie. Originally, I just thought they were just not super fun, but I think I was just bad at playing against birds in general. Now that I actually spend time to be I need to kind of mess that up instead of just focus on helping myself, I think I've come around to the faction a little bit. However, I do think they're tuned to be a little bit stronger than the other factions, intentionally or otherwise. So just getting 2 extra warriors every turn for a faction that really doesn't need the help, I don't know. And it usually caps out to where you just have all the birds on the map. And unless you're playing with both Swoop and Nobility, that could be interesting. I haven't done a ton of like you can play with all 4 if you want, from 0 to 4 traits. So Swoop and Nobility would be interesting because obviously that would be benefiting them, but it could come at a cost, and it would get to that a lot sooner than otherwise would. But by itself, I don't think it's that interesting. Last but not least, the runner-up, I guess, War Tax. Whenever you remove an enemy building or token, its owner loses 1 victory point. It's just, again, they all add wrinkles, different types of challenges. However, this one does it in a way that I think is not super fun. I like the fact that turmoil is one of the few ways that you can lose points in the game, like vanishingly few ways that it can take place. And to add this one to it so that any other faction can lose points in that way, because it's not just you're losing points, it's a 2-point swing because the birds get the point for removing the token or building and the other faction loses 1. So you're already losing a point because the birds are outpacing you for removing it. And now you're just like even further back. It's just, I don't know. I see Root overall as a very additive game. Lots of board games are additive. Losing points is just like, I think losing points is more not fun than gaining points is fun. If that makes sense. Like, especially if it's like, oh, the birds are just gaining a point for taking out a building. Dang it. But now it just, I don't need to say anything more about it. I think it's my least favorite one of the 4. But, mileage may vary. So let's talk about the changes that went on in Daylight. So there were 3 areas of change on the board. And here is kind of my read from biggest to smallest. So first off, movement. When you move in the new version of the Roost, the first tiebreaker, as we talked about, is going to a clearing without a roost. That is of pivotal importance, so they put it first. Before, the first thing you paid attention to was which adjacent clearing had the fewest enemy pieces. It was only after that, the first tiebreaker was which clearing also has no roost. So you would need to have a tie for fewest enemy pieces, and only then did you pay attention to where the roost was. So that's kind of huge. There was, at least what I ran into, if you kind of encroached on their territory pretty quickly and there are just cats everywhere at the beginning of the game, for instance, the birds would move out. They have to move. They would probably take control and plant a roost there. And the very next turn, if that clearing needed to move, they would look all around and say, oh, there are cats everywhere, so the safest place is to go back to where I came from. And they would get into this dreaded endless loop. They could, where they would just be in like turmoil, permanent loop, because they would never explore outwards to where they could actually put a roost down. They would just keep going back and forth to the clearings that had the fewest enemies, and they would keep building up warriors, but at a slow rate because they kept purging their decree. It just wasn't good. So now they're actually going to seek parts of the map in an intentional way so that they can spread the roost network in the same way that human players want to. So kind of important. So second, and by scope, this one's actually bigger, but there's just no way I couldn't put in, this was a genuine bug, just kind of an oversight that wasn't, it wasn't correct on the first board. So that has to be first, because the Electric Eyrie just did not work with that bug in place. However, this one's pretty huge. Because before, as I talked about, each suit on the decree, you would recruit, move, battle. Then you go to mouse, recruit, move, battle. Rabbit, recruit. You would do that by suit, as opposed to now doing recruit on all 4, move, and then battle in all 4. I think, so I guess the new way you can think about is, resolve horizontal layers rather than vertical slices. I think it's easier to remember to resolve all recruits and then all moves and then all, because your brain is just stuck in, think about it. There are different tiebreakers for each of these actions. And if you're going through all 3 actions for one column, you are having to code switch between those tiebreakers. And then you go to the next column and you have to do the same thing. As opposed to now, where when you're recruiting, the tiebreakers for that are the same. You're doing that 4 times. Same thing with moving, same tiebreakers. You go to battle, same tiebreakers, and then you're done. So I think it's easier this way. Huge change from what it was before. That's the second. All right, the third part of what's new in the new official version of the Eyrie is clarifications to the battle action. So first of all, it gets some clarification in the text, but also some tiebreakers. So clarification. When it says that the defender is the player with the most buildings in the clearing, it includes 0 buildings. So then it would go to tiebreakers after that if nobody had any buildings. But before, if it said with the most buildings in the clearing and nobody had buildings, could lead to confusion where people are like, well, who do they target? Now, boom, the answer is right there. Second, for target clearing, the first tiebreaker is identical. The second tiebreaker changes a little bit though, because in the original version, it said the players with the most buildings and tokens. It has removed the tokens part. It's just the buildings. So it doesn't matter how many tokens there are. It's only focused on the number of buildings in the area for that second tiebreaker. And third, there is now a brand new tiebreaker, which is the lowest priority clearing was added all together, which without that before, it just would have went to highest priority because that's the natural go-to. But again, I think this really adds to the character of the Electric Eyrie of being kind of underhanded, like trying to get back the forest in whatever way that they can. So the other part of the change to the battle action is for target defender. The first tiebreaker is identical, but again, the second is added all together, which is to say most victory points. Now there is a shadow third tiebreaker, as there always is, which is highest setup order. Because for clearings, if all other tiebreakers are even, there is always the tiebreaker of highest priority, which again, used to be the case for clearings, is now, you'll never get that with battles in with the Eyrie, because you'll always break the tie with the lowest priority. As for people or factions, the final tiebreaker is, if all other things are equal, it's whoever is first in the setup order. Boom, taken care of. And so there you go. That's the end of the changes that took place with the errata for the bird. And again, the link is down below in the description. If you don't have the new one upgraded, or if you don't have your old one upgraded to the new one, if you have a second edition printing, you are good to go. Or if you've already adjusted it like I have. So with that, that is the end of our walkthrough of the Electric Eyrie, the second of the original Clockwork factions, with a little bit more history to it than any of the other Clockworks thus far in terms of changing over time. Like I said, speaking of changing over time, my opinion of it has changed for the better over time. I think it's definitely challenging, especially if you don't actively reach out and mess with their plans. It can get to some scary times. But it's just one more tool in your root toolbox of how you want your games to play. So hopefully this was helpful. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. I'll try to get to them as soon as I can. And we will try to be rolling out the automated alliance video next week and just keep chugging away through the original 4. So we are ready to bring you the next factions from the next release, Clockwork 2, as soon as we're done with the first ones. So thanks for stopping by. Thanks for taking a pause, a good pause, and I will see you next time. Bye, everybody.